Arthur Bennett, 58, broke, blacklisted, stared at the unknown number. 3 months since he'd been fired for being too old. He answered. Arthur Bennett. The voice was silk over concrete. My name is Vito Moretti. I hear you're good with numbers. Very good. And I hear you've got nothing left to lose. Arthur's hand trembled. Your old company is under federal investigation for the financial irregularities you flagged 6 years ago. The ones they fired you for mentioning. Arthur's blood went cold. He'd never told anyone. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Cafe on Mulberry Street. Come alone. Who are you? A low chuckle. I'm the man who hires people the world throws away. Right now, I need someone with your particular expertise. The line went dead. When society discards you, the shadows don't just welcome you in, they show you what you're really capable of. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Now, let's go. Arthur Bennett's hands didn't shake as he packed his desk. 32 years reduced to a cardboard box, a coffee mug his daughter had made in 3rd grade, a photo of his late wife Margaret, 3 decades worth of performance awards that suddenly felt like participation trophies, and a desk nameplate that read, Arthur Bennett, Senior Operations Manager. Senior. The word tasted bitter now. Arthur, I'm so sorry, whispered Jennifer from accounting. She was 47, and Arthur could see the fear in her eyes. She knew she was next. In the new Global Innovations Incorporated, experience wasn't an asset. It was a line item to be eliminated. It's okay, Jen, Arthur said quietly, though it wasn't. You take care of yourself. The elevator ride down from the 14th floor felt longer than usual. Arthur caught his reflection in the polished steel doors, gray hair thinning at the temples, lines around his eyes from years of staring at spreadsheets, shoulders that had started to slope forward from decades at a desk. When had he gotten old? In the lobby, Arthur passed the new hires, 20-somethings with perfect teeth and designer athleisure wear, typing frantically on tablets, speaking in acronyms he'd never bothered to learn. They didn't look up as he walked past. To them, he was already a ghost. Outside, December rain soaked through his coat within seconds. Arthur stood on the sidewalk, box in his arms, and watched the building that had consumed most of his adult life. 43 floors of steel and glass, indifferent to his departure. The company would function just fine without him. Better, probably, according to the algorithms that had flagged his salary as redundant operational overhead. His phone buzzed. A text from his daughter Claire. Dad, how was your day? Arthur stared at the message. How do you tell your daughter, your brilliant, successful daughter who'd just started her career at a prestigious law firm, that you'd been deemed worthless? That the father who'd always preached hard work and loyalty had been discarded like outdated software? He typed back, Fine, sweetheart. Just fine. The first lie. There would be many more. Week 1. Arthur approached job hunting with the same methodical discipline he'd brought to his work. Updated his resume, highlighting his achievements, reduced operational costs by 23% through strategic vendor consolidation, managed cross-functional teams of up to 50 employees, implemented enterprise resource planning systems ahead of schedule and under budget. His resume was impressive. His age was not. The AI screening software rejected him before human eyes ever saw his application. Thank you for your interest, but we're seeking candidates whose experience more closely aligns with our current needs. Translation: You're too old, too expensive, and we can get someone younger to do it for half your salary. Week 3. Arthur, I'm going to be honest with you, said the recruiter, a woman young enough to be his daughter. She had the apologetic tone of someone delivering bad news to a terminal patient. Your experience is incredible, but most companies are looking for someone who can grow with the organization. Someone with more runway ahead of them. Runway. As if his career was a plane that had already landed, fuel exhausted, destination reached. I have at least 20 good years left, Arthur protested, hating how desperate he sounded. I understand. But perception is reality in this market. Have you considered consulting? Or maybe early retirement? Early retirement required savings. Arthur had savings once. Then Margaret got sick. Cancer treatments, experimental therapies, 3 years of fighting before the disease won. Their retirement fund had died with her. Week 8. The severance pay was gone. Arthur sat at his kitchen table, the same table where he and Margaret had shared breakfast for 25 years, surrounded by rejection emails printed on paper because his printer was too old to connect to his phone, and he couldn't afford a new one. We regret to inform you. Your qualifications don't match our current needs. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. 53 applications. 53 rejections. His mortgage payment was 3 weeks late. The electric company had sent a final notice. His car insurance had lapsed. Arthur had never been poor before, not really. He'd grown up working class, sure, but he'd always worked, always paid his bills, always believed that hard work and dedication would be rewarded. He'd been a fool. Week 12. Mr. Bennett? The voice on the phone was crisp, efficient. This is Sharon from Second Chance Employment Services. I have a potential opportunity for you. Arthur's heart leapt. Finally, someone saw his value. It's a warehouse position, Sharon continued. Night shift. Stocking and inventory management. The pay is $16.50 an hour. Arthur closed his eyes. $16.50 an hour. He'd been making $95,000 a year. His mortgage alone was $2,400 a month. The position requires the ability to lift 50 pounds repeatedly and stand for 8-hour shifts. Would you be interested? His back ached from decades at a desk. His knees complained when he climbed stairs. At 58, could he even do physical labor anymore? Yes, Arthur heard himself say. Yes, I'm interested. Great. I'll need you to come in for a physical assessment. There's a $50 fee for the evaluation, payable in advance. $50 to prove he was physically capable of being poor. I'll be there, Arthur said. He failed the physical. His back, his knees, his blood pressure, all considered risk factors for the warehouse's insurance policy. Even poverty had age requirements. Month 4. Arthur sat in his darkened living room at 2 a.m., unable to sleep. The foreclosure notice lay on the coffee table, illuminated by the glow of his laptop. He'd been browsing job sites for 6 hours, his eyes burning, his hope extinguished. His phone rang. Unknown number. Probably a debt collector. They'd been calling constantly now. Arthur almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Arthur Bennett. The voice was rough, older, with an accent he couldn't quite place. Brooklyn, maybe. Or New Jersey. Who is this? A friend of a friend. I hear you're looking for work. I'm not interested in scams, Arthur said wearily. No scam. I'm offering you a job. Using your actual skills. For actual money. Doing what? Operations management. Strategic planning. Problem solving. The things you're good at. Arthur felt a flicker of hope, immediately crushed by suspicion. What company? I'd rather discuss that in person. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. There's a coffee shop on Mulberry Street, D'Angelo's. You know it. I can find it. Good. Come alone. And Arthur. The voice dropped lower. Don't mention this call to anyone. Not your daughter, not your friends, not the police. This is a private business matter. Discretion is essential. Understand? Every instinct Arthur had screamed danger. This wasn't legitimate. Legitimate businesses didn't require secrecy. They didn't call at 2 a.m. They didn't mention the police unprompted. But Arthur thought about the foreclosure notice, about the empty refrigerator, about 32 years of loyalty earning him nothing but poverty and rejection. I'll be there, he said. The line went dead. Arthur sat in the darkness, his heart pounding. He should ignore it, should delete the call from his history, should keep looking for legitimate work, even though 4 months of searching had proven that no legitimate work wanted him. But desperation makes people do things they never thought possible. And Arthur Bennett had nothing left to lose. At exactly 3 p.m. the next day, Arthur walked into D'Angelo's coffee shop on Mulberry Street and stepped into a world from which there would be no easy return. The corporate world had deemed him obsolete. The underworld was about to prove them wrong. D'Angelo's coffee shop smelled like espresso and secrets. Arthur pushed through the heavy wooden door at exactly 3 p.m., his worn dress shoes clicking against checkered tile that had probably seen decades of hushed conversations. The place was nearly empty, an old man reading a newspaper in the corner, a young couple whispering over cappuccinos, and in the back booth, a man who radiated authority the way other men radiated cologne. Vito Moretti didn't stand when Arthur approached. He simply gestured to the empty seat across from him with one ring-laden hand, his sharp eyes cataloging every detail of Arthur's appearance: the frayed collar, the shoes that needed resolving, the barely concealed desperation. "Arthur Bennett," Vito said, his voice like gravel wrapped in silk. "Sit." Arthur sat. Up close, Vito was older than he'd sounded on the phone, mid-60s, with silver hair swept back and a face that suggested he'd seen everything worth seeing and hadn't been impressed by most of it. He wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than Arthur's last 3 mortgage payments combined. "I know everything about you," Vito began without preamble. 32 years at Global Innovations. Fired for being too expensive, too experienced, too old. Wife died 3 years ago, cancer. Daughter's a lawyer at Morrison & Fitch. You're 4 months behind on your mortgage, 2 weeks from foreclosure, and you've applied to 87 jobs in 3 months. Got 17 responses. All rejections. Arthur's throat went dry. "How do you?" "I make it my business to know things," Vito interrupted. "The question isn't how I know. It's whether you're smart enough to understand what I'm offering." "Which is?" "A job. 5,000 a week to start. More as you prove yourself." Vito leaned back, studying Arthur like a chess player considering his next move. "I need someone with your specific talents: logistics, operations management, strategic planning. Someone who understands how to make complicated systems run smoothly." "What kind of systems?" Arthur asked, though he already knew the answer. "The kind we don't discuss in detail during first meetings." Vito's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let me ask you something, Arthur. In 32 years of corporate work, did you ever do something you knew was wrong because your job required it? Lay off good people to hit quarterly numbers? Destroy a small vendor because a bigger one offered better margins? Make decisions that hurt people because the spreadsheet said to?" Arthur thought about the layoffs he'd organized, the vendors he'd squeezed, the corners he'd cut in the name of shareholder value. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "Then you already know how to work for me. The only difference is honesty. I don't pretend what I do is noble. I don't hide behind corporate doublespeak." Vito pushed an envelope across the table. $2,000. Consider it a consultation fee. Take 24 hours. Think about it. If you want the job, call the number inside. If not, keep the money and forget we met. Arthur stared at the envelope. $2,000 could stop the foreclosure proceedings. Could buy groceries. Could let him breathe for 1 more week. "Why me?" Arthur asked. "Why not someone younger? Someone already in your line of work?" Vito's smile turned genuine for the first time. "Because men our age are invisible, Arthur. Society stopped seeing us the moment we turned 50. That makes us dangerous. Nobody suspects the tired old man in the corner." He stood, buttoning his jacket. 24 hours. Choose wisely. Arthur walked out of D'Angelo's with $2,000 burning a hole in his pocket and a decision already made. By sunset, he'd paid his most urgent bill. There was no going back now. Moretti Imports occupied a 3-story brick building in Red Hook, Brooklyn, sandwiched between a legitimate shipping company and a restaurant supply warehouse. The sign outside was weathered but professional. Inside, the ground floor looked like any small import business: desks, filing cabinets, computers humming quietly, even a receptionist who smiled and buzzed Arthur through without question. It was the second floor, where the facade cracked. "Everyone, attention!" Vito's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. 6 men looked up from a conference table covered with papers, ledgers, and what looked disturbingly like surveillance photos. "This is Arthur Bennett. He'll be reorganizing our operations. You'll give him full cooperation." "Understood." The responses ranged from grudging nods to outright hostility. "Marco," Vito gestured to a man in his 30s with a neck like a tree trunk and eyes that had seen too much violence too young. My nephew. Head of security. Marco's handshake was designed to intimidate. Arthur didn't flinch, even as his knuckles compressed painfully. 32 years of corporate power plays had taught him never to show weakness. Tony Castellano, Vito continued, indicating a stocky man in his 40s with calculating eyes and a manila folder clutched protectively to his chest. Current operations manager. He'll show you our systems. Tony's smile was tight, territorial. Looking forward to working with you, Arthur. The lie was obvious to everyone in the room. My daughter, Rosa. Vito's voice softened slightly. A woman in a charcoal suit stood from behind a laptop, extending her hand with the confident grace of someone who'd earned her place through competence, not nepotism. She had her father's sharp eyes, but something else too. Maybe conscience, maybe just better camouflage. Mr. Bennett, Rosa said, I handle our legitimate operations. Import documentation, customs, tax compliance. If you need anything above board, I'm your resource. And finally, Father Dom. An elderly priest sat in the corner, rosary beads wrapped around weathered hands. He nodded beatifically, as if blessing a business meeting about stolen goods and protection rackets was just another Tuesday. Father keeps us spiritually grounded, Vito said without irony. Even sinners need confession. Arthur spent the next 4 hours reviewing their operations, and with each page, his stomach churned. Loan sharking with interest rates that would make payday lenders blush. Protection rackets masquerading as security consulting. Illegal gambling operations running through a network of bars and social clubs. Stolen merchandise moving through legitimate shipping channels. It wasn't the criminality that shocked him. He'd expected that. It was the inefficiency. Their supply chain was a disaster. No digital tracking, redundant routes, territorial disputes causing bottlenecks. It was like watching a Fortune 500 company run on 1970s technology. Your first assignment, Vito said, sliding a thick folder across his desk. Reorganize our import routes. We're losing money on inefficient distribution. Fix it. Arthur took the folder home, spread the papers across his kitchen table, and worked until 3 a.m. He created tracking spreadsheets, efficiency models, cost-benefit analyses. He applied every corporate logistics principle he'd learned, just substituting stolen electronics for a legitimate inventory. The next morning, he presented his report to Vito. The plan would reduce costs by 30%, increase distribution speed by 40%, and minimize exposure by consolidating routes. Vito read it carefully, then looked up with something like respect. This is excellent work, Arthur. Sir, Tony interrupted, his face flushed. I think there might be some errors in the data. The numbers don't match our current systems. Arthur's eyes narrowed. He'd triple-checked everything. What specifically doesn't match? Tony pointed to several figures that were indeed wrong, but Arthur knew they'd been correct in his original document. Someone had altered them, probably during the 20 minutes the report had sat on Vito's desk before the meeting. May I? Arthur took the document, pulled out his phone, and displayed his original spreadsheet. Here's my source data. Time-stamped at 6 a.m. this morning. Someone changed the figures after I submitted them. The room went silent. Tony's face drained of color. Vito's expression was unreadable. Tony, did you alter Arthur's report? I was just quality checking. Did you alter it? Sir, I didn't think. You don't sabotage family, Vito said quietly, which was somehow more terrifying than if he'd shouted. Arthur caught your mistake. Learn from it. Dismissed. As the meeting broke up, Arthur's phone buzzed. Claire. His chest tightened. Hey, sweetheart, he answered, stepping into the hallway. Dad. Finally. I've been worried. How's the job search going? Arthur looked back through the doorway at the conference room full of criminals. Actually, I found something. Consulting work. Import logistics. That's amazing. Dad, I'm so proud of you. Each word was a knife. Arthur closed his eyes, hating himself. Thanks, honey. Listen, I've got to run. Meeting starting. As he hung up, Vito appeared beside him. Family is complicated, isn't it? Yes, Arthur whispered. Tomorrow, you're going with Marco. Collection run. Time to see how the business really works. Vito's hand landed on Arthur's shoulder, heavy as judgment. Welcome to the family, Arthur. Arthur watched Marco crack his knuckles in the parking lot below and realized his real education was about to begin. The collection run started innocently enough. Marco drove a black Escalade through Brooklyn like he owned the streets, which in some neighborhoods, the Moretti family essentially did. Arthur sat in the passenger seat, his hands folded in his lap, trying to project a calm he didn't feel. First up, Marco announced, pulling up to a small Italian restaurant called Benedetto's. Polly's 3 weeks late. Borrowed 15 grand for new kitchen equipment. Now, he's avoiding calls. Inside, the lunch crowd was thin. Polly Benedetto stood behind the register, a man in his 50s with tired eyes and flour on his apron. When he saw Marco, the blood drained from his face. Marco, I was gonna call. 3 weeks, Polly. Marco's voice was conversational, but his body language wasn't. He moved into Polly's space like a predator. You think we're a charity? Business has been slow. The new pizza place down the street, they're undercutting everyone. Not my problem. Marco grabbed Polly's wrist, twisting it with practiced efficiency. The register fell, coins scattering across the floor. You got until Friday. 20 grand now, the original 15 plus 5 for being disrespectful. 20? Marco, please. The punch came fast. Polly's head snapped back, blood erupting from his nose. His wife screamed from the kitchen doorway. Arthur stood frozen, every instinct screaming at him to intervene, to stop this, to do something. He did nothing. Friday, Polly. Or next time, I break more than your nose. Back in the Escalade, Arthur's hands shook. Marco noticed, grinning. First time seeing real consequences, old man? Arthur swallowed bile. That was excessive. That was business. Polly borrowed money. He pays it back. Simple. Marco lit a cigarette. You think this is different than what you did in your corporate job? Please. You ever fire someone right before Christmas? Deny someone's health insurance claim? Force a supplier out of business because you found someone cheaper? That was different. Was it? Marco exhaled smoke. You just never had to see the blood. Made you sleep better. That night, Arthur couldn't sleep at all. He kept seeing Polly's wife's face, the terror in her eyes. But Marco's words echoed too. Arthur remembered the vendor he'd squeezed out of business in 2019, a family operation that couldn't compete with the mega supplier Arthur had chosen. He'd seen the owner's desperate emails, his pleading calls. Arthur had blocked his number and moved on. 6 months later, Arthur heard the man had lost his house. Arthur had never thought about it again. Not until now. The corporate world was just crime with better PR. Over the next 3 weeks, Arthur threw himself into work, burying his conscience in spreadsheets and systems. His gambling operation reorganization increased profits by 42%. He set up encrypted digital tracking for all transactions, blockchain-based, untraceable, bringing the Moretti family into the 21st century. The protection routes he redesigned required 20% fewer soldiers, while covering 30% more territory. The crew's hostilities shifted to grudging respect. Even Tony stopped sabotaging him after Arthur's systems saved Tony's nephew from a bad loan situation with a rival family. Old man knows his shit. Arthur overheard Marco telling another enforcer. Coming from Marco, it was practically a declaration of love. But it was Rosa who saw through him. She found Arthur late one night in the office, staring at his laptop screen without really seeing it. You're drowning, she said quietly, setting down 2 cups of coffee. I'm fine. No, you're not. You're compartmentalizing. Justifying. Telling yourself this is no different than corporate work. Rosa sat across from him. It is different, Arthur. And you know it. Then why are you here? Arthur challenged. You're educated. You could work anywhere legitimate. This is my family. I was born into it. Rosa's eyes were sad. You chose to walk through that door. That's the difference between us. Arthur had no response to that. His first real test came when the Calabrese family started moving into Moretti territory, specifically 3 gambling operations in Queens. Vito called an emergency meeting. "They're testing us," Vito said. "Seeing if we're weak. How do we respond?" Marco pounded the table. "We go in heavy. Make an example." "Which triggers a war," Arthur interrupted. Everyone turned to stare. "War is expensive. Draws police attention. Bad for business." "So, we do nothing?" Marco's voice dripped contempt. "We do what I did in corporate acquisitions." Arthur stood, moving to the whiteboard. "Isolate, undercut, absorb. First, we identify their supply chain, who provides their equipment, their security, their cash transport. Then we offer those vendors better deals. Cut off their resources." "That's not how this works," Tony protested. "Isn't it?" Arthur drew a diagram. "The Calabrese operations need suppliers, transportation, protection. All things we can control or influence. We make their operations more expensive than they're worth. They pull out on their own. No war. No police attention. Just smart business." Vito leaned back, studying Arthur with new appreciation. "Explain." Arthur spent the next hour outlining a strategy that used everything he'd learned in 32 years of corporate warfare. By the end, even Marco looked impressed. "Do it," Vito ordered. The plan worked flawlessly. Within 2 weeks, the Calabrese operations were hemorrhaging money. Their suppliers mysteriously had supply issues. Their security contractors found more lucrative opportunities elsewhere. Their cash transport routes encountered unexpected inefficiencies. Arthur watched it unfold from his laptop, tracking every variable like he was managing a hostile takeover, which, in a way, he was. Then came the call from Marco. "Arthur, you should see this." The hospital was in Astoria. 2 Calabrese soldiers had been beaten severely. One had a fractured skull, the other multiple broken bones. Not by Moretti people, Marco explained. By independent contractors who'd been hired to send a message about the territory dispute. "We didn't order this," Marco said. "But when we started squeezing them, they got desperate. Tried to make a violent statement. Our people defended themselves." Arthur stared at the hospital room window, seeing the machines keeping one man alive. His strategy hadn't pulled a trigger or swung a pipe, but his actions had set events in motion that led to this. "This is on me," Arthur whispered. "This is business," Marco corrected. "You won. The Calabrese are pulling out." Vito's thrilled. That night, Arthur sat in his apartment, staring at his hands. They were clean. No blood on them at all. But he could feel its weight anyway, invisible and permanent. His phone buzzed. "Claire. Dad, can we do dinner this weekend? I want to hear all about your consulting work." Arthur looked at his reflection in the darkened window. The man staring back was a stranger, well-dressed now, well-fed, financially secure, and complicit in violence he'd orchestrated from behind a computer screen. He typed back, "Dinner sounds perfect, sweetheart." Another lie. They were getting easier. Rose's words echoed in his mind. "You chose to walk through that door." The door was closed now, locked from the inside. And Arthur Bennett, 58-year-old former corporate operations manager, was learning that some choices you can't undo. You can only live with them, or learn to stop noticing the blood. 3 months into his new life, Arthur Bennett had become someone else entirely. Not just in circumstance, but in identity. The other families called him the accountant, whispered with a kind of respect usually reserved for enforcers and hitmen. He'd reorganized operations for 2 allied families, brokered a truce between warring factions using supply chain economics, and designed a money laundering system so elegant that even the FBI's forensic accountants would need a decade to unravel it. The money came fast. Arthur moved from his modest apartment to a renovated brownstone in Park Slope, paid off every debt, then started building savings that would have taken him 20 years to accumulate in his corporate life. He bought a new wardrobe, tailored suits that hung properly on his frame, Italian leather shoes that didn't need resoling. He looked like what he'd always pretended to be in the corporate world, successful. "Dad, this place is incredible." Claire stood in his new living room, taking in the exposed brick, the modern kitchen, The view of Prospect Park. International consulting must be paying really well. The clients value expertise, Arthur said, which was technically true. Vito valued his expertise enough to pay him $8,000 a week now, with quarterly bonuses. I'm so proud of you. Claire hugged him. After everything you went through, you rebuilt. That takes real strength. Arthur held his daughter, feeling the weight of her pride like stones in his pockets. Every compliment was a knife. Every, "I'm proud of you," was a reminder of the man he used to be versus the man he'd become. The turning point came on a Thursday evening at Cipriani, an upscale Italian restaurant in Manhattan. Arthur was dining alone, reviewing financial projections on his tablet, when he heard a familiar laugh. He looked up and saw Richard Chen, his former boss from Global Innovations, holding court at a nearby table with 3 younger executives. Richard's eyes passed over Arthur without recognition. Just another middle-aged man in a suit, beneath notice. Arthur felt something dark unfurl in his chest. He stood, walked to Richard's table and smiled. "Richard Chen. It's been a while." Richard looked up, confused, then his face shifted through a cascade of emotions. Confusion, recognition, then barely concealed condescension. "Arthur? Arthur Bennett? Wow, I almost didn't recognize you. You look different." "Success suits me." Arthur's smile didn't waver. "I heard you found something. Consulting, right?" Richard's tone suggested consulting was one step above unemployment. "That's great. Really great. Good for you, for landing on your feet." "And you?" "Still at Global Innovations. Executive VP now," Richard said, chest puffing slightly. "Managing the entire Northeast Operations Division. It's demanding, but somebody has to make the tough calls." "Tough calls? Like firing loyal employees to pad quarterly reports." "Well, congratulations," Arthur said smoothly. "Enjoy your dinner, Richard." As he walked away, Arthur felt it, that dark satisfaction of knowing something Richard didn't. That the man who'd called him obsolete would shit himself if he knew Arthur now managed operations for one of the most powerful crime families on the East Coast. That Arthur had more real power in his pinky finger than Richard would ever have in his entire career. It was a dangerous feeling. Intoxicating. That night, Arthur lay awake in his expensive bed in his expensive apartment and realized something disturbing. He was sleeping better than he had in years. The insomnia that had plagued him during his corporate days, the anxiety, the stress, the feeling of never being quite good enough had vanished. He slept like a stone now. His conscience, however, weighed heavier with each passing day. The shift in the crew's dynamics was palpable. Tony Numbers approached him one morning, uncharacteristically nervous. "Arthur, I need help. My nephew Frankie, he got in deep with some loan sharks. Not our people, Russians. They're threatening to break his legs if he doesn't pay 20 grand by Friday." Arthur looked up from his spreadsheet. "How much does he actually owe?" 12 grand. "But the interest." "I'll handle it." Arthur made 3 phone calls, leveraging relationships he'd built, calling in favors, applying pressure through proper channels. By Thursday, the Russians agreed to accept the original 12 grand, no interest, no violence. Tony's eyes were wet when he thanked him. "My sister's kid. Her only son. You saved him, Arthur. I won't forget that." From that day forward, Tony was loyal in a way that went beyond professional courtesy. Arthur had saved family. In this world, that meant everything. Even Marco changed. After Arthur's strategic victories against 2 rival families, Marco started introducing him as the accountant. Nobody touches him. It was protection, offered not out of duty, but respect. Arthur had proven he could win wars without firing a shot. In Marco's world, that was a kind of magic. Arthur found himself mentoring the younger associates, teaching them what Vito had taught him. Violence is expensive. It draws attention. Use your head before you use your hands. Solve problems strategically, and you'll last longer than the guys who think muscle solves everything. They listened because Arthur's methods worked. One evening, Vito called Arthur into his office, poured 2 glasses of scotch, and sat back with a satisfied smile. You know why I hired you? My operations experience. That was part of it. Vito swirled his scotch. But the real reason? Men our age. We're invisible, Arthur. Society stopped seeing us the moment we turn 50. We're furniture. Background noise. And that makes us the most dangerous people in any room. How so? Because nobody expects the tired old man in the corner to be the one running the whole game. Vito's eyes gleamed. Young guys, their flash and ego. Everyone watches them. But you and me? We move through the world like ghosts. We can be anywhere, do anything, and nobody remembers we were there. That's real power. Arthur understood then. He'd felt it at Cipriani, walking past Richard without initial recognition. Felt it collecting information at social events where people spoke freely around him, assuming he was harmless. Age had made him invisible, and Vito had taught him to weaponize that invisibility. It was brilliant, and it was terrifying. The operation should have been simple. A territorial expansion into Jersey, using Arthur's now signature strategy. Economic pressure, strategic partnerships, elegant maneuvering. No violence necessary. But one of the rival family's hot-headed soldiers didn't get the memo about pulling back. During a confrontation outside a social club, shots were fired. Most missed their targets. One didn't. Emily Rodriguez, 42, mother of 3, was walking home from her shift at the hospital. Wrong place, wrong time. The bullet that was meant for a Moretti associate found her instead. Arthur learned about it from a news report. Watched the footage of her husband sobbing, her children's faces blurred for privacy, the memorial growing outside the social club where she died. He'd never met Emily Rodriguez. Never knew she existed until she didn't. But his strategy had put those men on that street corner at that exact moment. The chain of causality led directly back to decisions he'd made in an air-conditioned office, typing into a laptop. Arthur attended the funeral anonymously, standing in the back of St. Anthony's Church, while a priest eulogized a woman whose only crime was walking home from work. He watched her children, 14, 11, and 7, crying in the front pew. Watched her husband's shoulders shake with grief that would never fully heal. Arthur wanted to leave, to run, to somehow undo the last 3 months. But he stood there, forcing himself to witness the cost of his invisible hands. Outside the church, as mourners dispersed into the gray afternoon, a woman approached him. Asian, late 30s, professional but not corporate. She wore a simple black suit and an expression that suggested she knew exactly who he was. "Arthur Bennett," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Arthur's blood ran cold. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" She pulled out a badge. FBI, Special Agent Sarah Chen. "We need to talk." Arthur's mind raced through options: run, deny, lawyer up. But Agent Chen's next words stopped him cold. "I know what you are. I know what you do. And I know you didn't want that woman to die." Her voice dropped lower. "The question is, how many more Emily Rodriguez's before you decide this isn't worth it?" She handed him a card, plain white with just a phone number. "When you're ready to talk," she said, "call me." Before it's too late, Agent Chen walked away, disappearing into the crowd of mourners, leaving Arthur standing outside the church with a dead woman's blood on his invisible hands and a phone number that represented either salvation or damnation. He couldn't tell which anymore. Agent Sarah Chen chose her meeting locations carefully. The coffee shop in Williamsburg was hipster anonymous, full of freelancers on laptops, musicians comparing notes, couples having intense conversations. Nobody paid attention to 2 middle-aged people talking quietly in the corner. "RICO case," Chen said without preamble, sliding a folder across the table. "Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. We've been building it for 18 months. Wiretaps, surveillance, financial forensics. We have the Moretti family cold on at least 47 federal charges." Arthur's coffee went cold in his hands. "Then why are you talking to me?" "Because you're smart enough to see the endgame." Chun leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Everyone goes down eventually, Arthur. Vito, Rosa, Marco, Tony, all of them. The only question is whether you go down with them." "I'm not." "Don't." Chen's interruption was sharp but not unkind. "Don't insult either of us by pretending you're just a consultant. I know what you do. I know how valuable you are to them. And I know you're not like them. Arthur stared at his reflection in the dark coffee. What do you want? Testimony. Full cooperation. Details on their operations, financial structures, everything. Chun pulled out a second document. In exchange, full immunity. Witness protection, if necessary. You walk away clean, Arthur. You get your life back. I don't have a life to get back to. You have a daughter. Chen's voice softened. Claire. Brilliant young lawyer at Morrison and Fitch. She thinks you're doing legitimate consulting. What happens when she learns the truth? When she sees you in handcuffs on the news? The words hit like a physical blow. Arthur imagined Claire's face, the betrayal, the horror. How long do I have? To decide? Or until we move? Chen stood, buttoning her coat. We're moving in 6 months, maybe less. But deciding? That's up to you. Every day you wait is another day deeper in. She left her card on the table. Arthur stared at it for 20 minutes after she was gone. The paranoia started 3 days later. Vito called an emergency meeting, his face grave. We have a leak. FBI knows too much, operational details they shouldn't have. Someone's talking. The room erupted in accusations. Arthur watched the crew turn on each other like rats in a sinking ship. Tony, Marco said suddenly. Tony's been acting weird. Nervous. Tony's face went white. What? No, I would never. You've been late to meetings. Making phone calls outside. Leaving early. Marco stood, and the implied threat was clear. My nephew's in rehab. Tony protested. I've been coordinating his care. Ask Arthur, he helped me. Convenient, Marco growled. Using Arthur as an alibi. Enough. Vito's voice cut through the tension. Tony, you're coming with us. We're going to have a conversation. Arthur understood what that meant. Conversation in this context involved a basement, a chair, and methods designed to extract truth through pain. Wait. Arthur stood, his heart pounding. This doesn't make sense. Arthur. Vito began. If Tony were the informant, why would the FBI let us suspect him? They'd protect their asset. Feed us someone else. Arthur moved to the whiteboard, thinking out loud. The leak started 18 months ago, right? Tony's only been in his current position for 14 months. The timeline doesn't work. Vito's eyes narrowed. Who's had access for longer? Arthur wrote names, crossing them off systematically using logic and timeline analysis. 20 minutes later, only 3 names remained. One of them was Father Dom. The silence was deafening. No, Vito whispered. Not Dom. He's been with me for 30 years. He's also been acting strangely, Rosa said quietly. Missing confessions. Looking exhausted. I thought it was his age, but... Marco was already moving toward the door. I'll bring him in. They found Father Dom in his church, kneeling before the altar, rosary beads wrapped around trembling hands. He didn't resist when Marco brought him to the warehouse. He looked almost relieved. Father. Vito's voice was broken. Tell me it's not true. Father Dom met his eyes with tears streaming down his weathered face. I couldn't carry the weight anymore, Vito. The sins, the blood, the bodies. I thought I could bless it all away, but you can't bless evil and make it holy. You betrayed me. Vito's hands shook. My family, my trust. I betrayed God first, Dom said quietly. 40 years of watching you sin and calling it righteousness. The FBI agent, she understood. She said I could still do one good thing before I die. Vito stood abruptly, walked to the window, his shoulders rigid. When he spoke, his voice was ice. Marco. Handle it. Make it quick. Arthur's blood ran cold. Vito. Arthur stays. Vito didn't turn around. Everyone stays. This is what betrayal costs. They took Father Dom to the basement. Arthur wanted to run, to close his eyes, to be anywhere else. But Marco's hand on his shoulder was gentle yet firm. Boss wants you to see, to understand. Arthur descended the stairs on legs that felt like water. The basement was exactly what he'd feared. Concrete floor, a single chair, tools hung on the wall that had no legitimate purpose. Marco was efficient, professional. The shot was clean, quick. Father Dom whispered a prayer as he died, his own final absolution. Arthur watched it all. Didn't look away. Couldn't look away. The report of the gun echoed in the confined space, and with it, whatever remained of Arthur's soul shattered like glass. They buried Father Dom's body in the industrial park outside Newark, in a hole dug beforehand, as if they'd known. Maybe they had. Maybe this was always how it ended for people who tried to leave. Back at the office, Arthur sat in the bathroom, hands shaking, stomach churning. He'd witnessed a murder. Stood by and watched. That made him complicit. That made him a murderer too, just one who didn't pull the trigger. Rosa found him there an hour later. She locked the door behind her, her face a mixture of pity and disgust. "You're not one of them," she said flatly. "Stop pretending you are." "I'm here, aren't I?" "I watched." "You're here because you're trapped. Because you took money when you were desperate, and now you're in too deep to see daylight." Rosa knelt beside him. "My father, Marco, even Tony, they were born into this. It's in their blood. But you? You're playing dress up in monster clothes, and it's destroying you. Then what do I do?" Arthur's voice cracked. "I don't know. But stop pretending you belong here. That lie is the most dangerous one you tell." That evening, Arthur sat in his expensive brownstone, staring at his phone. On the screen was a text from Claire. "Dad. Good news. I got time off next week. I'm coming to visit. Can't wait to see your new place and meet your business partners." Arthur's hands trembled as he read it. Claire coming here. To his new life. To the world he'd built on blood and lies. He thought about Agent Chen's card, still in his wallet. About Father Dom's final prayer. About Emily Rodriguez's children at her funeral. About the man he used to be and the man he'd become. His phone buzzed again. This time, a message from an unknown number, just 2 words. "We're watching." Arthur looked out his window. 3 stories below, a sedan was parked across the street, engine running, 2 silhouettes inside. FBI surveillance. Another text from Marco. "Boss wants you at the warehouse tomorrow. 8 a.m. Important meeting." Arthur was caught between 2 closing walls, the FBI on one side, the Moretti family on the other, and his daughter about to walk into the middle of it all. He poured himself a scotch with shaking hands and watched the FBI sedan watch him back. Somewhere in the city, Father Dom's body was already cold in the ground. Somewhere else, Agent Chen was probably building her case, adding Father Dom's murder to the growing list of charges. And in his daughter's apartment uptown, Claire was probably packing for her visit, excited to see her father's success, proud of his comeback. Arthur drank the scotch in one burning swallow and poured another. The noose was tightening. Soon it would be tight enough to hang. The rented office space in Midtown cost Arthur $3,000 for a week. Professional furniture, corporate artwork, a receptionist borrowed from one of Rosa's legitimate businesses. The business cards read Bennett Consulting Group, International Logistics Solutions. Everything looked legitimate because Rosa had made sure it was, at least on paper. "She's your daughter," Rosa had said when Arthur begged for help. "I won't let her walk into the real operation. But this is the last time I cover for you." Claire arrived on Tuesday, radiant with pride. She toured the fake office, met the fake receptionist, and believed every word of Arthur's carefully rehearsed lies. When Rosa appeared, sharp suit, professional demeanor, Claire's face lit up. "Dad, you didn't tell me your business partner was so accomplished." "Rosa handles our international operations," Arthur said smoothly, hating himself. They had lunch at an upscale bistro. Claire talked about her cases, her career, her life. Arthur watched his daughter's face glow with happiness for him, and each smile was a knife to his chest. "I'm so proud of you, Dad," Claire said, squeezing his hand. "After global innovations threw you away, you proved them wrong. You rebuilt everything." Arthur thought about Father Dom's body in the industrial park, about Emily Rodriguez's children, about the gun in Marco's hand. "Yeah," he whispered, "I rebuilt everything." After Claire left for the train station, Arthur sat in the empty rented office and put his head in his hands. Rosa found him there, her expression unreadable. "She loves you," Rosa said quietly. "She has no idea who you really are. That must be nice." Arthur had no response. While Arthur played house with his daughter, the real business continued. The Russo family, younger, tech-savvy, aggressive, was pushing into cryptocurrency operations, digital money laundering, cyber extortion. They were everything the old guard feared. The future. "We crush them," Marco insisted at the War Council. "Show them this is our territory." "That's yesterday's thinking," Arthur interrupted. Everyone turned to stare. "The Russos understand something we don't. The future of organized crime isn't in cash and territory, it's in data and digital currency. We can fight them and lose, or we can partner and dominate." Vito's face was skeptical. "We don't partner with enemies." "In business, there are no permanent enemies," Arthur said, channeling every corporate merger he'd ever managed. "Only permanent interests. The Russos have technology we need. We have infrastructure and connections they lack. Together, we control the entire market." "They won't agree to partnership," Tony said. "They will if I'm the one proposing it." Arthur stood, moving to the whiteboard. "I'm nobody. Just an old accountant. Not a threat. I can arrange a neutral meeting, act as mediator. Worst case, they say no and we're back where we started." Vito studied him for a long moment. "Do it." "But Arthur? If this goes wrong, it's on you." The meeting was set for Thursday night at a neutral location, a closed restaurant in Queens. Arthur arrived early with Vito, setting up the space to feel collaborative rather than confrontational. When Sal Russo walked in with his son Vincent, Arthur played the harmless old man perfectly. "Gentlemen, please sit. I'm just here to facilitate a conversation between two successful organizations." The negotiation was going beautifully. Sal Russo saw the logic immediately. Partnership meant less violence, more profit, expansion into new markets. They were 20 minutes from a handshake when the door exploded inward. Marco crashed through with 6 enforcers, guns drawn. "Boss, we got intel about an ambush." "Marco, no," Arthur shouted, but it was too late. Vincent Russo pulled his weapon. Someone fired. The restaurant erupted into chaos, gunshots, shouting, tables overturning. Arthur dove for cover, his ears ringing. Then Rosa was there, pushing him down behind the bar. A shot rang out. Rosa gasped, her hand going to her shoulder, where blood bloomed across her white shirt. "Rosa!" Arthur caught her as she fell. "I'm okay," she gritted through pain. "Stop this. You're the only one who can." Arthur stood, hands raised, voice cutting through the chaos with unexpected authority. "Stop. Everyone, stop firing." Something in his tone, the corporate executive who'd managed crisis meetings, the man who'd commanded boardrooms, made everyone freeze. "This is a misunderstanding," Arthur said, his voice steady despite his shaking hands. "Marco thought he was protecting us. Vincent thought he was defending himself. But nobody here wants a war. Wars are expensive. They draw federal attention. They're bad for everyone's business." He looked at Sal Russo, then at Vito. "We were 10 minutes from an agreement that would have made us all richer and safer. Are we really going to throw that away because of a communication failure?" Sal looked at his son's gun, at Marco's enforcers, at Rosa bleeding on the floor. Then he lowered his weapon. "Your accountant's got balls, Vito. And he's right. War's expensive." Vincent reluctantly holstered his gun. Marco did the same. "Rosa needs a hospital," Arthur said. "And then we finish this conversation. Properly." 2 hours later, the partnership was formed. Rosa was in surgery, stable but unconscious. Arthur sat in the waiting room, Rosa's blood still on his shirt, and realized he'd just negotiated a major criminal alliance, while his daughter thought he was a legitimate consultant. He looked up and froze. Across the waiting room, partially hidden behind a magazine, was Agent Sarah Chen. She lowered the magazine, met his eyes, and raised a camera. The flash went off once, capturing Arthur covered in blood, surrounded by known criminals. Chen smiled, pocketed the camera, and walked away. Arthur understood immediately. She had evidence now. Him at a meeting where shots were fired, blood on his clothes, surrounded by both families. His corporate skills saving a criminal partnership. The noose wasn't just tightening anymore. It was cutting off his air. "You're the fucking rat." "No." The call came at 4 a.m. Vito had suffered a massive heart attack. By the time Arthur reached the hospital, the family was already gathering like vultures circling a dying king. "He's not going to make it," Rosa told Arthur in the waiting room, her eyes red but her voice steady. "Hours, maybe. Days if we're lucky." Marco paced like a caged animal. "When he goes, I'm taking over. The old guard supports me. We're going back to basics: territory, respect, power." "That'll start a war," Rosa said coldly. "With the Russos, with the FBI, with everyone. Then we fight." Marco's jaw was set. "Better than your corporate bullshit plan to go legit. We're criminals, Rosa. Act like it." Arthur saw it clearly. The family would tear itself apart. Marco's path led to violence and federal prison. Rosa's path led to legitimacy, but required removing Marco first. Someone had to make a choice. He'd already made it. That afternoon, Arthur met Agent Chen in a parking garage. "I need you to trust me," he said. "And I need a deal in writing. Full immunity for me. Witness protection, if necessary." And Rosa Moretti walks away clean. Chen's eyes narrowed. "What are you offering?" Marco Moretti. Tony Castellano. The entire old guard. Caught red-handed with enough evidence to put them away for life. Arthur pulled out a flash drive. "Everything I've documented. Plus one more thing. I'm going to deliver them to you personally."
"How?"
Marco's ambitious. Desperate to prove he should lead. "I'm going to give him exactly what he wants: a meeting with powerful Russian investors interested in expanding our cryptocurrency operations. He'll bring documentation to impress them. Evidence of everything." Chun studied him. "The Russians are us. The Russians are you." Arthur's smile was cold. "Marco brings evidence, you raid the meeting, everyone gets arrested. I'm just a consultant who was invited to provide technical expertise." Shocked and horrified to discover my clients were criminals. "And Rosa?" "Rosa's been quietly legitimizing operations for months. She has plausible deniability. Her name's on the legal businesses, not the criminal ones. I made sure of that." Chen was quiet for a long moment. "You're a cold son of a bitch, Arthur." "I'm a survivor." Arthur met her eyes. "Do we have a deal?" She pulled out a document. Signed by the district attorney. "Full immunity in exchange for testimony. Rosa Moretti is explicitly excluded from prosecution. You wear a wire to the meeting. That's non-negotiable." Arthur signed without hesitation. The setup was elegant. Arthur approached Marco 2 days later with a golden opportunity. Russian investors, wealthy oligarchs looking to move money through crypto channels, wanted to meet. They'd heard about the Moretti-Russo alliance and saw potential for massive expansion. "This could secure your leadership," Arthur told Marco. "Show the family you can bring in serious money. But you need to impress them. Bring evidence of our current operations, our capacity, our reach. One more performance. One more lie. And then, maybe, Arthur Bennett could finally disappear into the life he'd destroyed everything to build." Her vision was darkening. "If I were the rat, why would I keep documentation? Think, Marco. Then why are you creating it?" Arthur made a split-second calculation. The truth might save him, or it might get him killed. But he was out of options. "Because everyone in this business gets betrayed eventually," Arthur said, his voice raw. "Father Dom betrayed Vito. The FBI is building a RICO case. When the walls come down, and they will come down, I wanted leverage. Something to negotiate with. To protect myself. To protect all of us." Marco's grip loosened slightly. "Bullshit. You think I'm scared of prison?" Arthur met Marco's eyes. "I'm 58 years old. I've got maybe 20 years left if I'm lucky. I'm scared of dying in a basement like Father Dom because someone suspects me. This documentation? It's my insurance policy that if something happens to me, everything goes to the feds automatically. I'm more valuable alive than dead. That's the point. It was a beautiful lie, woven from threads of truth. Arthur watched Marco's face process it, saw the moment doubt crept in. You're playing a dangerous game, old man. I've been playing dangerous games since the day I walked into D'Angelo's. Arthur straightened his collar, his heart pounding. The question is whether you trust me or not. Because if you don't, we're both fucked. Marco released him, stepping back. I'm watching you. I'd be disappointed if you weren't. After Marco left, Arthur sat in the darkness of the office, his hands shaking. He'd talked his way out of death, but he'd also confirmed Marco's suspicions. The walls were closing in from every direction. His phone buzzed. A text from Claire. Dad, are you free this weekend? Want you to meet someone special. I think I'm in love. Arthur stared at the message. His daughter, falling in love, building a life, believing her father was a legitimate success. And here he sat, one bad decision away from prison or a bullet. He looked at his laptop, at the encrypted files that represented months of documentation. Evidence that could destroy the Moretti family. Evidence that could save Rosa. Evidence that could earn him immunity. Evidence that would break his daughter's heart when she learned the truth. Arthur opened a new file and began typing. Not documentation this time. A plan. His own gambit. A way to play all sides. The FBI, the family, Marco, Rosa, and maybe, just maybe, walk away alive. It was a long shot. But Arthur Bennett had built a career on long shots. The game was entering its final moves. Arthur just hoped he'd survive to see checkmate. Marco's eyes gleamed. Set it up. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday night at a warehouse in Red Hook. Marco arrived with Tony and 4 soldiers, carrying a briefcase full of documentation, operation details, financial records, everything Arthur had helped him prepare. Everything that would bury them. Where are these Russians? Marco asked, suspicious of the empty warehouse. They're cautious, Arthur said, his heart pounding beneath the wire taped to his chest. They'll be here. The door burst open. But instead of Russian investors, it was FBI agents. Dozens of them, weapons drawn, badges flashing. FBI, get on the ground. Now. Marco's face went from confusion to rage to horror in seconds. He looked at Arthur, understanding dawning. You. I'm sorry, Arthur said, and meant it. Not sorry enough to stop, but sorry nonetheless. They arrested Marco, Tony, and all 4 soldiers. Found the briefcase full of evidence. Read them their rights while Arthur stood to the side, playing the shocked civilian perfectly. I had no idea, Arthur told the agents, his voice shaking with practiced fear. I thought they were legitimate businessmen. Oh God, was I working for criminals? Agent Chen met his eyes over Marco's head as they cuffed him. The slightest nod. Well done. Vito died 3 hours later, never knowing his nephew had been arrested. Never knowing his trusted accountant had orchestrated the betrayal. Never knowing his empire was crumbling. Arthur stood in Vito's hospital room, staring at the old man's peaceful face, when Rosa walked in. She looked at her father, then at Arthur, and her expression was pure devastation. Marco's been arrested, she said quietly. The FBI raided a meeting tonight. They have evidence. Lots of it. Arthur said nothing. Evidence you compiled. Rosa's voice hardened. You did this. You orchestrated everything. I saved you, Arthur said. Marco would have started a war that destroyed everyone. Now you can legitimize the businesses. Walk away clean. Isn't that what you wanted? Not like this. Rosa's composure cracked. You destroyed my father's legacy. You betrayed Marco, Tony, everyone who trusted you. You played us all like we were pieces on your corporate chessboard. I did what was necessary to survive. At what cost? Rosa stepped closer, her voice trembling with rage and grief. My father's last hours were spent watching his family tear itself apart. Marco's going to prison for life. And you get to walk away. To go back to your daughter and your comfortable life, while we all burn. You're not burning, Arthur said. You're free. Free to be legitimate. Free to build something real. I gave you that. You gave me nothing but blood and betrayal. Rosa's eyes were wet. Get out. Get out of this hospital, out of this city, out of our lives. And if I ever see you again, Arthur, if you ever contact me, if you ever try to justify what you did, I will tell the FBI exactly how you orchestrated this. How you manipulated everyone. How you're not a victim, you're a predator in sheep's clothing. Arthur held her gaze. Will you? The question hung between them. Rosa had the power to destroy him. One phone call to Agent Chen, one testimony about Arthur's true role, and his immunity deal would crumble. He'd be charged as a co-conspirator, a mastermind, a criminal. Rosa looked at her father's body, then back at Arthur. When she spoke, her voice was ice. No. Because my father trusted you, and destroying you would dishonor his memory. But you're dead to this family, Arthur. Dead to me. I never want to see your face again. She walked out without looking back. Arthur stood alone in the hospital room with Vito's corpse, the wire still taped to his chest, and realized he'd won. He'd survived. He'd gotten everything he wanted: freedom, immunity, a clean slate. So, why did he feel like he'd lost everything that mattered? His phone buzzed. Claire. Dad. Emergency. Can you come over? I need to talk to you about something important. Arthur looked at his reflection in the darkened window. The man staring back was a stranger. A survivor. A betrayer. A man who'd sacrificed every principle to avoid drowning. He typed back, On my way, sweetheart. 6 months later, Arthur Bennett, now Arthur Walsh, lived in a small coastal town in Maine where nobody asked questions and everyone minded their business. His apartment was modest, a 1-bedroom above a bookstore with a view of the harbor. He consulted for local businesses, a hardware store needing inventory optimization, a fishing company wanting to streamline distribution, a bakery struggling with supply costs. Legitimate work. Honest work. Work that let him sleep at night. Most nights, anyway. The estrangement from Claire had been the final cost. Rosa had kept her word not to destroy him legally, but she'd sent Claire everything. Documentation, newspaper articles about the arrests, Arthur's role in it all. Not out of cruelty, Arthur understood, but because Claire deserved the truth. His daughter's last message still sat in his phone, undelete, a wound he couldn't stop touching. I don't know who you are. Don't contact me again. 3 weeks after that message, Arthur had disappeared. New name, new city, new life. The FBI had helped, though helped was generous. Agent Chen had made it clear. Stay invisible, stay quiet, and they'd pretend he didn't exist. Arthur thought about redemption often. Whether survival at any cost was the same as damnation. Whether the man he'd become was an evolution or a corruption. He had no answers, only the quiet rhythm of small-town life and the weight of choices that couldn't be unmade. The memory of that final confrontation with Rosa remained sharp. She'd found him packing his apartment the night after Vito's funeral, her face a mask of controlled fury. I should turn you in, Rosa had said. Tell Chen exactly how you manipulated this entire thing. But you won't. Arthur had continued folding clothes. Because I gave you what you wanted. Freedom. Legitimacy. A future. Rosa had thrown an envelope on the bed. My father's lawyers. Transfer documents for the legitimate businesses. You're signing everything over to me. Every legal holding, every clean asset. You keep nothing. Arthur had signed without reading. It was a fair price. You're dead to this family, Rosa had said. But if I ever see you again, if you ever try to contact anyone connected to us, I won't be merciful. Are we clear? Crystal. Rosa had paused at the door. The documentation you gave me, it's helping. I'm unwinding the criminal operations, using the legitimate businesses to build something real. So maybe you did one decent thing in all this mess. Maybe. She'd left without saying goodbye. Arthur learned later that Moretti Imports had indeed transformed. Rosa had used his meticulous documentation to systematically dismantle the criminal elements while expanding the legitimate holdings. Import-export businesses, shipping companies, logistics consulting, all clean, all legal. She'd turned her father's empire into exactly what Arthur had always pretended it was. At least someone had gotten redemption. The knock on Arthur's door came on a Tuesday morning. Agent Sarah Chen stood there, coffee in hand, looking tired but satisfied. "You're not supposed to know where I am," Arthur said. "I know where everyone is." Chun invited herself in, settling at his small kitchen table. "Relax. I'm not here officially." "Then why are you here?" "To tell you that Rosa Moretti's companies are completely clean. We've been watching for 6 months. No illegal operations, no hidden criminal activity. She actually did it." Chun sipped her coffee. "Your documentation helped dismantle one of the city's major crime families and transform it into a legitimate business empire. That's unprecedented. Is there a but coming? You're not a good man, Arthur." Chun met his eyes. "You manipulated everyone, betrayed people who trusted you, and orchestrated the destruction of an organization from the inside. But you did one genuinely good thing. Rosa's building something real now. Something that doesn't hurt people. Does that balance the scales?" "I'm not a priest. I don't do moral accounting." Chun stood. "But I will tell you this. Stay invisible, stay quiet, and I'll keep pretending I don't know where you are. Build a quiet life here. Help people legitimately. And maybe, eventually, you'll figure out who Arthur Bennett really is underneath all the survival instincts." She left her coffee cup on the table, a strange gesture of humanity from a woman who'd helped destroy his old life. That weekend, Arthur drove 6 hours to visit Margaret's grave. He'd been avoiding it, afraid of what he'd say, but the weight of silence had become unbearable. He stood before her headstone, feeling foolish talking to granite and earth, but needing to say it anyway. "I survived, Margaret. That's what you asked me to do, right? To keep going after you were gone. To provide for Claire." His voice cracked. "But I don't know if you'd recognize the man I became. I did things. I crossed lines I never thought I'd cross. I justified it as survival, but maybe it was just cowardice dressed up in strategy." The cemetery was silent, except for wind in the trees. "Claire hates me now. She knows everything. And I can't even blame her, because I am exactly what she thinks I am." Arthur touched the cold stone. "I survived. But I lost everything that made survival worthwhile. So tell me, love, did I win or did I lose?" The stone had no answers. Arthur hadn't expected any. On Monday, Arthur was consulting for the Harbor Grill, a small restaurant struggling with operational costs. The owner, Tom, was a good man, honest, hardworking, trying to keep his family business alive in an economy that devoured small operators. "Your supply chain is the problem," Arthur explained, showing Tom his analysis. "You're ordering from 5 different vendors when you could consolidate to 2, negotiate better rates, reduce delivery costs by 40%. Tom's eyes widened. "How did I not see this?" "Because you're focused on cooking and customers. That's as it should be. This is what I do." As they finished, Arthur noticed a young woman, maybe 24, clearing tables with her jacket already on, eyes red from crying. Tom saw him looking. "Had to let Jess go," Tom said quietly. "She's good, but she doesn't fit our culture. Too millennial, you know? Always on her phone, wants flexible hours, doesn't understand how we do things." Arthur felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd heard those exact justifications before, had used them himself. "Tom, can I talk to Jess before she leaves?" He found her in the parking lot, sitting in her car, staring at her phone. Arthur knocked on the window. She rolled it down, suspicious. "I'm Arthur. I consult for Tom. I heard what happened." "Great." Another lecture about work ethic from someone who doesn't understand student loans and gig economy, and she stopped. "Sorry. I need this job. My rent is due in 3 days and I have no idea how I'm going to pay it." Arthur saw himself 6 months ago. Desperate. Willing to do anything. Standing at a crossroads where desperation could lead to very dark places. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to a contact he'd promised himself he'd never use. Hesitated. Then pressed call. Rosa Moretti. Her voice was professional, distant. "It's Arthur." Silence. "I know we're done. I know you never want to hear from me again. But I have someone who needs a chance. Young woman, hardworking, just fired for being the wrong age in the wrong direction. She deserves better than what she's getting. More silence. Then, why are you calling me about this? Because you're building something legitimate now. Something that values people for their work, not their age or their circumstances. And because I know what happens to desperate people. I know the doors they walk through when every legitimate door closes. Rosa was quiet for so long Arthur thought she'd hung up. Then, have her call my office tomorrow. I'll interview her. That's it, Arthur. Don't ever contact me again. I won't. Thank you, Rosa. The line went dead. Arthur turned to Jess. I know someone in New York. Legitimate import business. They're always looking for good people. Call this number tomorrow. Mention my name, Arthur Walsh, and they'll interview you. Jess looked at the number he'd written down, then at him, confused. Why would you do this for me? Because the world throws people away every day, Arthur said. And I'm trying to be the kind of person who picks them up instead of stepping over them. He walked back to his apartment as the sun set over the harbor. His phone sat in his pocket, contacts for both his old life and his new one residing in the same device. Claire's blocked number. Rosa's disconnected relationship. Agent Chen's implicit surveillance. Tom's grateful texts. Jess's hopeful future. Arthur Bennett, Arthur Walsh, was neither redeemed nor damned. He was simply a man who'd survived the only way he could, and now had to live with every choice that survival had required. He'd been complicit in violence. He'd betrayed trust. He destroyed lives while saving others. He'd been a coward and a strategist, a victim and a predator, invisible and powerful all at once. The man who'd been fired for being too old had learned that invisibility was a weapon. That desperation was a doorway. That survival had a price that could never be fully paid. As Arthur unlocked his door, he noticed a black sedan parked across the street. Engine running. 2 figures inside, faces obscured in the fading light. They'd been there for 10 minutes. FBI surveillance? One of Marco's associates who'd made bail? Someone from his corporate past? Rosa's people checking that he'd stayed gone? Arthur watched the car watch him back. Then he turned, walked inside, and locked the door. Some questions didn't need answers. Some shadows would follow him forever. He'd learned to live with that. The world had thrown him away. He'd refused to stay in the trash. And now he lived in the space between, not quite clean, not quite criminal, not quite redeemed, not quite damned. Just surviving. One day at a time. The sedan's engine continued running long after Arthur's light went out.
In a world that measures worth in youth and disposability, sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones society has already thrown away. Arthur Bennett's story is a testament to resilience, a warning about desperation, and a mirror reflecting the brutal calculus we all make when survival is the only thing left. He was fired for being too old. He was hired by the Mafia. And in the space between those two moments, Arthur Bennett discovered that the only difference between corporate crime and organized crime is the quality of the suit you wear while committing it. Some legacies are written in light. Others are written in shadows. Arthur's legacy lives in both.